The elegant ballroom buzzed with laughter, champagne glasses clinking in the air. Karen, dressed in a designer gown, surveyed the room with a smirk, her eyes landing on a poor woman standing at the edge, awkwardly clutching her worn-out purse. The woman's clothes were mismatched, and the scent of poverty lingered around her like an invisible shroud. Karen couldn't hold back her sneer. "Well, well, well," Karen's voice rang out, loud enough for the entire crowd to hear. "Did you really think you could belong here? Look at you. You reek of desperation and failure." The crowd snickered, and the woman, Lila, stood frozen, her heart sinking with every cruel word. But just as Karen basked in her moment of superiority, the sound of a sleek car pulling up interrupted her. The doors swung open, and out stepped Adam Wright, one of the wealthiest men in the world. His gaze swept across the room, then paused on Lila, the very woman Karen had mocked. And in a stunning turn of events, he walked towards her, taking her hand in his, and said in a voice that turned every head, "My wife. What do you think about Karen's actions? Comment below with your thoughts, and tell us what you would do in this situation. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories." Karen's eyes widened as Adam Wright's words rang in the air like a deafening gong. "My wife." The words echoed around the room, stealing the breath from everyone's lungs. For a split second, the world seemed to freeze. Karen, her jaw hanging open in shock, watched as Adam held Lila's hand with a warmth and affection she had never seen him display. The room, once filled with lively chatter, fell into stunned silence. Lila stood there, stunned herself, unable to fully grasp what had just happened. She had never imagined that such a moment, one filled with opulence and grandeur, would be a part of her life. Her once humiliated, broken spirit was now standing tall, hand in hand with a man who appeared to be the epitome of success. And not just any man, a billionaire. The kind of person Karen, and everyone else in the room, had admired from a distance. But now, it seemed, Lila was the one by his side, the one who had been mocked for her clothes, her smell, and her apparent lack of wealth. "Wife?" Karen repeated, her voice a mixture of disbelief and scorn. This is some kind of joke, right?" She looked around, trying to find a way to make sense of the scene, but no one else seemed to know what to say. The guests were too caught up in the confusion to react, their expressions a mix of shock and envy. Lila could feel the eyes of the room on her. She had never felt more out of place, yet at the same time, she felt a surge of strength inside her, a force that she had not known existed until now. Adam's hand was still wrapped around hers, reassuring and steady, as though his touch alone could protect her from the world's judgment. But she knew better. She had spent her entire life facing scorn and judgment. This moment, as surreal as it felt, was just the beginning of a new reality. Adam looked directly at Karen, his face hardening with an unmistakable edge of authority. "You have a problem with that, Karen?" he asked, his voice calm but cutting. Karen's face flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation. She was used to being the center of attention, always in control, always admired. But now, her carefully crafted world of wealth and superiority was being unraveled in front of her eyes. She had been so sure of her place, so confident in her power over others, that she had never once thought that someone like Lila, someone she had belittled without a second thought, could be the one to stand beside a man like Adam. "No," Karen sneered, forcing a smile to mask the bitterness rising in her chest. "I just didn't realize you were the type to settle for someone like her." She made a subtle motion toward Lila, as though her words would somehow lessen the value of the woman standing by Adam's side. But Adam was unfazed. He didn't even look at Karen when he spoke next. "Maybe you should stop underestimating people based on their appearance, Karen. You never know who they really are." The words stung, and Karen was momentarily speechless, her fingers twitching as though she wanted to lash out. She had always used her beauty, her social status, and her wealth to control situations, to assert her dominance. And now, in front of the very crowd she had worked so hard to impress, she was losing her grip. Lila, still reeling from the unexpected turn of events, took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She had never thought of herself as deserving of such attention. Her whole life, she had been the invisible woman, the one who worked tirelessly, always in the background, never noticed. The woman who had no time for luxuries, only for survival. And yet, here she was, standing in front of the most powerful man she had ever met. Her life changed in an instant. Adam smiled at her, his eyes warm and sincere. "Come with me," he said, leading her through the room, away from Karen and the crowd of stunned onlookers. The clatter of heels on marble echoed behind them, but Lila couldn't bring herself to turn back and face the woman who had mocked her just moments ago. All she could do was follow Adam's lead, her heart pounding with uncertainty and excitement in equal measure. As they moved further into the grand ballroom, Lila's mind swirled with questions. Why had Adam chosen her? What did he see in her? Was this some sort of social experiment? A test to see if someone like her could ever be worthy of his world? She couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong here, that this world of wealth, glitter, and power was far beyond her reach. But Adam seemed to read her mind. "I know this is overwhelming," he said gently, looking down at her with a reassuring smile. "But I'm not doing this to prove a point. I'm doing this because I see you. I see your strength, your dignity, and your grace. I see a woman who has fought through hardships, and that's something I admire." Lila was speechless. She had never been told anything like that before. In her world, people either pitied her or ignored her. They never saw her strength. They saw only her struggles, her poverty, and her rough exterior. But Adam saw something else entirely. For the first time in her life, Lila felt seen not for what she lacked, but for who she truly was. As they reached a quiet corner of the ballroom, away from the prying eyes of the other guests, Adam looked at her with sincerity. "Lila, I know this is a lot to take in, but I want you to understand something. The world will always judge us based on what they see on the outside, but the true measure of a person is what lies within. And you, Lila, are worth far more than anyone here could ever imagine." Lila's heart swelled, the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. For years, she had felt invisible, unimportant, as though her worth was determined by the clothes she wore, the money she had, and the things she could afford. But here, in this moment, in this room full of the rich and powerful, Adam's words rang truer than anything she had ever known. "You don't have to impress anyone here," Adam continued. "All you need to do is be yourself, and I promise you, that's more than enough." The words hung in the air between them, a promise that felt both fragile and unbreakable at the same time. In that moment, Lila understood something she had never truly grasped before. Her worth was not determined by the opinions of others. It was not defined by her past, her appearance, or her circumstances. It was determined by who she was inside, by the strength of her spirit and the depth of her character. As Adam's words sank in, Lila began to believe it too. For the first time in her life, she felt like she could stand tall, not just as a woman, but as a force to be reckoned with. Lila sat quietly at the edge of the grand table, the dazzling lights above her illuminating the ballroom like a sea of stars. She had never been in a place like this before, a place where the air smelled of wealth, and every conversation buzzed with the sound of the privileged speaking about things Lila could barely comprehend. It was as though she had stepped into another world entirely, a world she could never have imagined. Despite the overwhelming grandeur, there was a peace within her, a quiet knowing that she belonged here just as much as anyone else. Adam's words kept echoing in her mind. "You don't have to impress anyone here. Just be yourself." And for the first time in her life, she truly believed it. No longer did she feel the weight of insecurity pressing on her chest. She had a sense of calm, something that had always eluded her. But that calm was shaken when Karen entered the room. Karen had always been the epitome of everything Lila had felt. She could never be elegant, poised, and above all, confident. She had a way of carrying herself that commanded attention, making everyone around her feel small. She was a woman who knew her worth, or at least, that was how it seemed. Her entrance into the ballroom only emphasized her dominance in the room. She swept past the guests, her heels clicking loudly on the polished marble floor, drawing the eyes of everyone present. Lila could feel her stomach knot as Karen's gaze landed on her. It wasn't just a glance, it was a judgment, a look of disdain that seemed to pierce straight through her. Lila knew what Karen was thinking. She could almost hear the mocking words in her head before they were even spoken. "Well, well, well," Karen said, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she made her way toward Lila. "It seems someone's been given a taste of the high life." She eyed Lila's simple yet elegant dress, the one Adam had chosen for her, and then her gaze fell to Lila's face. "I never thought I'd see the day when someone like you would be invited into this world. Tell me, Lila, how does it feel to finally get a taste of something you could only dream of?" Lila's heart raced. It wasn't the first time Karen had made her feel inferior, but this felt different. She had been in situations like this before, people from Karen's world always looking down on her, but now, with Adam by her side, she knew she didn't have to take it. "Karen," Adam's voice interrupted, low and controlled. "That's enough." Karen turned her head slowly, eyes flashing with irritation. "Oh, Adam, don't tell me you're defending her now. A woman like her doesn't belong here. You can't just pick someone off the street and turn them into royalty. This is the real world, not some fairy tale." Lila's heart dropped, but Adam's firm hand on her shoulder gave her strength. She glanced at him, and the look in his eyes was one of unwavering support. "You might think so, Karen," he said calmly, "but the only thing that truly matters is the heart of the person, and I can promise you, Lila's heart is worth more than anything in this room, including yours." The words hit harder than anything Lila had ever heard. They weren't just empty words meant to defend her. They were an undeniable truth. Adam wasn't just protecting her out of obligation or guilt. He was speaking from a place of deep belief. He believed in her, and that belief, in that moment, was all she needed. Karen stood frozen, her mouth open, as though she was trying to come up with a comeback, but no words came. Her whole world, one built on appearances and status, was crumbling. It was clear she had underestimated Lila from the very beginning, and now, the tables were turning in a way she could never have predicted. Lila stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. She didn't want to let anger take hold of her. This was a moment for grace. She had already been humiliated once today, but not anymore. She wasn't going to let Karen's words get to her. "Karen," she said, her voice steady, "you might have more money, more clothes, and more power than I do, but that doesn't mean you are any better than me." She looked Karen square in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "True worth is found in the way we treat others, not in how much we own or what we look like." The words hung in the air between them, the silence in the room deafening. It wasn't just Lila who was standing up for herself. It was every person who had ever been looked down upon. Every person who had ever felt inferior because they didn't have the same advantages as someone else. Lila wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been dismissed or belittled. Karen's face turned red, her nostrils flaring with rage. "You think you can just walk into my world and tell me how to behave?" she spat. "You'll never be one of us, Lila. You'll always be the poor woman who had to latch on to someone rich to survive." Lila felt the sting of her words, but it didn't cut as deep as it once would have. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "You don't get to decide who I am, Karen. I am not your project. I don't need your approval or your pity." Her voice was quiet but firm. "And I certainly don't need to fit into your idea of who deserves to be here." Adam's hand tightened around hers, a silent promise that he stood beside her. Karen glared at them both, but in that moment, she realized something she hadn't seen before. Her power was fading. The world she had built, the one where money and status gave her control, was crumbling around her. She had never known what it meant to be truly seen by someone, not until Adam had looked at her the way he did. He didn't see her poverty, her ragged clothes, or her past. He saw her for who she was, and that made all the difference. Karen turned and walked away, her heels clicking harshly against the marble floor. The crowd slowly began to disperse, leaving Lila and Adam alone in the center of the room. Leela turned to him, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Adam smiled softly, his eyes full of warmth. "You don't need to thank me, Leela. You've always been worth more than you think." In that moment, Leela realized something. She didn't need to be rich or glamorous to be valuable. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The only thing that mattered was being true to herself. And with Adam by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. The following days were a blur for Leela. What had seemed like an impossible dream was now her reality. Everywhere she went, the world was different. She was no longer the woman with tattered shoes and a worn-out dress. She was the woman who had been chosen by one of the wealthiest men in the world. But despite the change in her status, the battle inside her heart raged on. She had never been one to chase wealth or status. And now, as she sat at Adam's side in his luxurious penthouse overlooking the city, she couldn't help but feel like an outsider in this new world. Adam, ever the supportive figure, noticed her quiet moments of reflection. He could sense her unease. As much as he cared for her, he knew that this sudden shift in her life was something she would have to come to terms with on her own. "You're quiet today," Adam observed one morning, his gaze soft as he sat down next to her on the balcony. He handed her a cup of coffee, his gesture filled with the kindness she had come to expect from him. "Are you all right?" Leela looked out at the sprawling city below, the sun rising in the distance. Her fingers wrapped around the warm cup, grounding her in the moment. "I don't know, Adam," she replied softly. "I've never imagined a life like this, and part of me feels like I'm not meant to be here, that somehow I'm living someone else's life." Adam studied her closely, sensing her hesitation. He had always admired her strength, her ability to stand tall in the face of adversity. But now, it seemed, she was facing the hardest challenge of all, the challenge of accepting her worth, not because of the money or the luxury around her, but because of the woman she had always been. "You're not living someone else's life, Leela," he said, his voice firm with conviction. "You're living your life, the one you've earned, the one that comes from your heart and your actions. Everything you've been through, your struggles, your perseverance has led you here. You belong here, just as much as anyone else." Leela turned to him, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "I don't know if I'll ever truly believe that, Adam," she confessed. "I feel like I've been pretending. I've spent so much of my life hiding, surviving, just getting by. And now I'm in this world where people have everything, and it feels like I'm not enough, that I'll never fit in." Adam's expression softened. He placed the cup down on the table and took her hand, his touch grounding her in a way that nothing else could. "Leela, I don't want you to fit in. I want you to stand out because you already do. What makes you different is what makes you special. It's your heart, your kindness, your resilience. That's what I see, every single day." Leela took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling in her chest. "It's just so hard," she murmured. "I don't know how to be someone I'm not. I don't know how to walk in these circles with confidence when I've spent my whole life being invisible." "Then stop pretending," Adam said gently. "Just be yourself. That's all I ever want from you." Well, for the first time in days, Leela felt a sense of peace settle within her. She wasn't expected to change into someone she wasn't. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. She had already proven her worth to the one person who mattered, the person who saw her for who she truly was. As the days passed, Leela slowly began to embrace her new life, not as an act of pretense, but as an expression of who she had always been. She attended galas, meetings, and charity events with Adam, her confidence growing with each passing day. She still felt out of place at times, but Adam's unwavering support made all the difference. He never once made her feel like she was anything less than enough, just as she was. But Karen's presence was always lingering in the background, like a shadow that refused to fade away. Despite her public humiliation, Karen refused to give up on her vendetta against Leela. Every time Leela and Adam attended an event, Karen would show up, lurking in the corners, her eyes burning with resentment. One evening, At an exclusive charity gala, Karen finally confronted Lila again. The moment Karen entered the room, her eyes immediately locked on Lila, and Lila could feel the tension building. Karen walked over with a smile, but it was cold, calculated. Well, if it isn't the new darling of the elite, Karen said, her voice laced with venom. Tell me, Lila, how does it feel to live in a world you don't belong in? Lila stood her ground, refusing to let Karen's words get to her. Adam was beside her, a silent protector, his presence enough to keep Karen at bay. I belong here, Lila said, her voice steady, not because of the money or the title, but because I've earned my place. And so have you, Karen. You've earned a seat in this world by the choices you make, and I've earned mine the same way. Karen's face twisted with anger, but she couldn't find a way to respond. She was trapped in her own bitterness, unable to see past her envy and resentment. She had built her entire identity on her wealth, her looks, and her ability to control others. But now, she was faced with the reality that someone like Lila could take her place, could stand beside the man she had always coveted, and do so with grace and dignity. You think you've won, don't you? Karen sneered, her eyes narrowing. You think you've taken everything from me. I haven't taken anything from you, Karen, Lila replied calmly. You've given it up by your own actions. I'm not here to take anyone's place. I'm here to make my own. Karen's lips curled into a final, bitter smile. We'll see about that, she said, her voice dripping with malice. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking loudly against the floor as she disappeared into the crowd. Lila stood there for a moment, her pulse quickening as the weight of Karen's words pressed against her chest. But then, she felt Adam's hand gently resting on her back, his touch a steady reminder that she didn't need to prove herself to anyone. I don't care what Karen thinks, Adam said quietly. You've already won, Lila. You've won by staying true to yourself, by being who you are. Lila smiled, feeling the last of her doubts fade away. She wasn't perfect, she didn't have all the answers, but she was enough, just as she was, and that was more than enough. Lila's life had truly begun to transform, but there were still moments when she felt the weight of her past threatening to pull her back. The dazzling parties, the lavish events, and the attention from the city's elite were still new and unfamiliar to her. Sometimes, in the middle of it all, she'd catch herself looking at the women in the room, the ones who had always belonged, who had never known what it felt like to be an outsider. They moved with such grace, their laughter filling the air, their conversations floating effortlessly between topics of wealth, power, and status. In those moments, Lila felt like an intruder, someone who had been granted access but wasn't quite sure how to fit in. But Adam was always by her side, his quiet presence reminding her that she didn't need to change for anyone. He had seen her strength from the very beginning, and he loved her for who she was, not for the world she had entered. Yet, despite his unwavering support, Lila couldn't help but wonder how much longer she could keep up the charade of fitting into a world that was never hers. One evening, while they were attending a high-profile gala, Lila found herself standing alone by the grand windows of the ballroom. The view was breathtaking, the city lights twinkled below like 1,000 stars, a world of wealth and privilege that seemed so far out of reach just a few months ago. She watched the couples dance, the women adorned in luxurious gowns, the men in sharp suits, their lives seemingly so perfect. For a brief moment, Lila felt a pang of insecurity. What did she really have in common with these people? What if they saw through her, saw the poor woman she had once been? She didn't have much time to dwell on her thoughts before she heard a voice beside her. You look lost, Adam said, his voice warm with familiarity. Lila turned to him, smiling faintly. I'm not lost, just thinking. About what? Adam asked, his eyes searching her face. Lila hesitated, then shrugged. About how different everything is. Sometimes, I feel like I'm playing a part in someone else's life, like I don't belong here. Adam took her hand gently, leading her to the center of the room, away from the shadows of her self-doubt. You don't have to fit into their world, Lila, he said, his voice calm but filled with purpose. You're already in your own world. The world you've built with your heart, your kindness, and your strength. That's the only world that matters. Lila nodded, trying to let his words sink in, but her mind was still clouded with uncertainty. She had spent so much time fighting for her place in the world that she hadn't allowed herself to truly embrace the life she had now. It wasn't just about the luxury or the wealth, it was about the love and acceptance she had found with Adam. And yet, there was always a part of her that feared she might lose it all, that she wasn't worthy of the life she was now living. As they danced together, Lila's thoughts drifted back to Karen. She couldn't escape the feeling that Karen was still plotting, still determined to tear apart everything that Lila had worked so hard to build. Every time they crossed paths, Karen's gaze was filled with disdain, and her words, though often veiled in politeness, always carried a hidden bitterness. Lila had tried to ignore her, but the woman's presence, like a dark cloud, seemed to follow her wherever she went. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was something deeper. Karen wasn't just angry that Lila had won Adam's affection. She was angry because she had lost her control. She had lost her power, and it terrified her. A week later, at another high society event, Karen made her move. It was a grand dinner party held at one of the most prestigious venues in the city. The entire room was filled with whispers, the clinking of glasses, and the hum of polite conversation. Lila and Adam had just arrived, and as they made their way through the crowd, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She noticed Karen standing across the room, her eyes fixed on her with a predatory intensity. Lila tried to ignore the woman, but Karen wasn't the type to let things slide. As she approached, her smile was wide, but her eyes held a malicious glint. "Lila," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "I've been dying to speak with you. I didn't expect to see you here tonight, but it's a pleasant surprise, I suppose." Lila braced herself, the familiar tension rising in her chest. "Hello, Karen. What brings you here?" "Oh, you know, the usual. I'm just trying to keep up with the new crowd." Karen's words dripped with sarcasm. "Tell me, Lila, how does it feel to be the other woman in a billionaire's life? You must be overwhelmed by all this wealth, all this attention." Lila's heart skipped a beat, but she refused to let Karen see the effect her words had. "I'm not trying to keep up with anyone, Karen. I'm just living my life the best way I know how." Karen's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered, her eyes flicking to Adam, who was standing nearby, deep in conversation with some other guests. "And what exactly does he see in you, Lila? You're not his type. You're not even close to the women he's usually with." The barb stung, but Lila stood her ground, her voice steady. "You don't know anything about what Adam and I have, Karen. You don't know how much he means to me or how much I mean to him." Karen's eyes flashed with anger, but she masked it with a forced chuckle. "Maybe you're right. But then again, maybe you're just another woman who's been swept away by a rich man's promises. We all know how those stories end." Lila didn't flinch. "You should stop worrying about the endings of other people's stories, Karen. You have your own to live." Karen's face twisted in frustration, but she didn't have the chance to say another word. Adam had walked over, sensing the tension between the two women. He placed a hand on Lila's shoulder and looked at Karen with a calm but unwavering gaze. "Is there a problem here, Karen?" Adam asked, his voice low and firm. Karen swallowed, her words caught in her throat. "No, Adam, just some small talk, that's all." "You do." Adam didn't reply. Instead, he led Lila away from Karen, toward the quieter side of the room. As they walked, Lila couldn't help but feel a wave of relief wash over her. Despite Karen's words, despite her attempts to provoke, Lila knew she had already won. She had Adam's love, his trust, and the strength to rise above the petty judgments of others. That night, as they left the event, Adam turned to her, his face soft with affection. "You handled her better than I could ever have," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. "I'm proud of you." Lila smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I didn't handle her, Adam. I just stood my ground. And that's enough for me." It wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about fitting in with the crowd. It was about standing tall, knowing who she was, and having the courage to never back down from who she was meant to be. The weeks that followed the gala were filled with an intense mix of growth and reflection for Lila. As the days passed, the walls of doubt that had once caged her began to crumble. Adam's belief in her, his steadfast support, gave her a foundation she never thought possible. She had always fought to survive, navigating a world that constantly reminded her of her place at the bottom. But now, with Adam by her side, she was slowly discovering that her place in this world didn't have to be defined by what she lacked. It was defined by what she brought to the table, by her strength, and by her heart. Yet, the shadows of her past still loomed large. The memories of her struggles, her constant fight against the odds, lingered like an echo in the back of her mind. Every time she caught herself in a moment of peace, a voice would creep in, telling her she wasn't worthy. But now, Lila had something she had never had before, the courage to push those voices aside. One afternoon, Adam invited her to meet with some of his business partners at a luxury hotel downtown. The meeting was important, and he had asked her to accompany him, hoping that her presence would help smooth over some tense discussions. Lila had never attended such meetings before, and the thought of being in a room full of powerful men and women made her uneasy. But Adam reassured her, telling her that she would be just fine, that she had a voice, and it mattered. As they entered the sleek, modern conference room, Lila felt the weight of all the eyes on her. The polished suits, the smartly dressed women with their confident smiles, and the cold, sleek atmosphere made her feel small. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she wasn't here to hide. She wasn't here to apologize for who she was. The meeting started, and the conversation quickly shifted to some important business negotiations. Adam, as always, handled the discussions with ease, his voice commanding attention, his demeanor calm and authoritative. But as the meeting progressed, Lila noticed something she noticed, the way the men at the table looked at her, their eyes lingering for just a moment longer than necessary. It wasn't the warmth she had gotten used to from Adam. It was something colder, more calculating. One of the men, a tall figure with sharp features and a gaze that seemed to pierce through her, spoke up. "Mr. Wright," he began, "I have to say, your choice of company here is interesting." He paused, his gaze flickering toward Lila. "I wasn't aware that you had a partner in these dealings. We've always admired your taste in people, but this..." He trailed off, leaving the words hanging in the air. Lila's chest tightened. She could feel the judgment in his words, in the way he looked at her. He wasn't just questioning her presence at the meeting, he was questioning her worth, her ability to be part of this world. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, but Adam beat her to it. His voice was firm, cutting through the tension in the room like a blade. "Let me be clear," Adam said, his eyes locking with the man's. "Lila is not just my partner in life. She is my partner in business as well. She has more intelligence, more insight, and more integrity than any of you will ever realize. If you don't like it, you can leave, but she stays." The room went silent, the air thick with the weight of Adam's words. Lila looked at him, her heart swelling with both gratitude and awe. He wasn't just defending her because of his feelings for her. He was defending her because he genuinely believed in her. He saw her as more than just a woman who had been picked up from the streets. He saw her as a powerful individual in her own right. The man who had spoken first seemed to shrink back, his arrogance melting away in the face of Adam's unwavering confidence. "Of course, Mr. Wright. I meant no disrespect," he stammered, his voice faltering. "I was simply surprised." Lila's lips parted slightly as she processed what had just happened. This wasn't just Adam standing up for her. This was Adam recognizing her worth in a room full of powerful people. He didn't see her as an accessory to his success. He saw her as an equal, and in that moment, Lila realized that she didn't need anyone's approval. She had earned her place here, just as much as anyone else. The rest of the meeting passed without incident, the tension in the room dissipating after Adam's defense of her. As they left the conference room, Lila felt a mixture of emotions. She had held her own in that room. She had stood strong in the face of doubt and judgment, And it wasn't just Adam who had believed in her, it was herself. She was beginning to believe that she was worthy of this life, of the world Adam had opened up to her. That evening, as they sat down for dinner at their penthouse, Adam looked over at her with a soft smile. "You were incredible today," he said. "I'm proud of you." Lila smiled, but it wasn't the same smile she had worn when they first met. It wasn't the smile of someone unsure of her place in the world. It was a smile of confidence, a smile of someone who knew that they had earned everything they had. "I wasn't sure I could do it," she admitted. "But I realized something today. I don't need anyone's approval. Not yours, not anyone else's. I'm enough as I am." Adam reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You've always been enough, Lila," he said softly. "And now you're starting to see it too." The next few months were filled with more challenges and triumphs. Karen, of course, had not given up on her vendetta. She continued to spread rumors, to try to sabotage Lila's reputation. But each time Karen tried to undermine her, Lila stood her ground. She didn't need to engage in petty arguments or battles for superiority. She had something far more valuable: inner strength. One day, as Lila was walking through one of the city's upscale shopping districts, she ran into Karen again. This time, Karen was alone. Her eyes narrowed as she caught sight of Lila. She walked up to her, a smug smile on her face. Well, Karen said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Look at you. Still here, I see. I thought for sure you'd be long gone by now. But I suppose people like you always have a way of sticking around." Lila stopped in her tracks, meeting Karen's gaze with a steady, unwavering look. "And yet, here I am," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not going anywhere." Karen's smile faltered for a moment, and Lila could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. For all her money, her looks, and her arrogance, Karen still couldn't seem to find the peace that Lila had. And in that moment, Lila realized that she didn't need to prove anything to anyone, least of all Karen. She had already won. Lila walked away, her steps confident, knowing that she had nothing left to prove. She was more than enough. Lila woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside their penthouse window. A serene and peaceful morning that contrasted the whirlwind of emotions she had been carrying for the past few months. As the sunlight poured into the room, she couldn't help but feel a sense of calm that had become increasingly familiar in the life she was building with Adam. It was a life she had never imagined for herself, a life that, at one point, she had thought was far beyond her reach. And yet here she was, standing at the beginning of a new chapter, with the man who believed in her more than anyone ever had. She stretched, the cool sheets tangling around her body, and turned to look at Adam, who was still asleep beside her. He had been a constant source of support and love, a rock she never thought she would find. He had shown her that she didn't have to hide anymore. She didn't have to pretend to be something she wasn't. Adam had taught her how to stand tall, how to embrace her own worth, and most importantly, how to love herself. As she slipped out of bed, Lila couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The once timid, unsure woman had transformed into someone who commanded respect, and it wasn't just from the world around her, it was respect from within herself. She had shed the layers of insecurity that had once clouded her every decision. Now, when she looked in the mirror, she saw someone strong, someone worthy, someone who had overcome more obstacles than most people would ever know. But despite all the progress, there was still one thing gnawing at her. Karen, the woman who had made her feel inferior from the moment they had met, the one who had tried to tear her down at every turn, hadn't given up. Her presence was still felt, and every time Lila thought she was moving past her, Karen found a way to make her feel like an outsider once more. Today, Lila knew, would not be any different. The charity event they were attending that evening was one of the most anticipated in the city, a gathering of the elite, a place where reputations were made and broken. Adam had promised that they would go together, as he often did, but Lila couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would be different. There was a sense of unease in the air that she couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the usual nerves before a big event, it was something more. As they entered the venue, The grand hall was everything Lila had expected, elegance in every corner, sparkling chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, the polished floors reflecting the shimmering gowns and sharp suits of the guests. Lila felt the familiar wave of insecurity rise within her, but she quickly shoved it aside. She had been through this before, and tonight, she wasn't going to let anything or anyone steal her confidence. Adam, as always, stood by her side, his hand resting gently on her back, his presence like a shield against the world. They mingled with other guests, exchanging pleasantries, discussing philanthropy and business deals, but Lila's eyes kept drifting back to Karen, who was across the room, surrounded by her usual entourage. Karen had always managed to be the center of attention, commanding the gaze of everyone around her. But tonight, there was something different in the way she held herself. Her posture was tense, her smile strained, and for the first time, Lila saw a flicker of uncertainty in Karen's eyes. Lila's curiosity got the better of her, and before she could stop herself, she found herself walking toward Karen. Adam noticed and followed closely behind, his hand never leaving her side. As they approached, Karen's gaze immediately snapped to Lila, her eyes narrowing as though preparing for another confrontation. "Well, well," Karen said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who finally decided to show up, and here I thought you'd be too busy pretending to belong in this world to grace us with your presence." Lila met her gaze with calm, unwavering confidence. "I'm not pretending to belong, Karen. I do belong. Just like you, just like anyone else here." Her voice was steady, strong, free of the insecurity that had once held her back. Karen scoffed, her lips curling into a mocking smile. "Oh, please, don't you get it yet? You're just a token. A poor girl swept up by a rich man who's using you to prove he's not just some cold-hearted billionaire. But deep down, you know it's not real. You'll never be one of us." End quote. Lila felt the familiar sting of Karen's words, but instead of reacting, she turned to Adam, who had been silently observing the exchange. He stepped forward, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the vicinity. "Karen," Adam said, his voice low and firm, "you seem to be under the impression that you can dictate who belongs and who doesn't, but that's not your call to make. Lila is here because she deserves to be here, not because she's trying to impress anyone, but because she's earned her place." Lila felt a warmth spread through her chest as Adam spoke, his words carrying more weight than she could ever put into them herself. This was the man who had stood by her side from the very beginning, the man who had seen her strength before she could even see it in herself. And now, he was standing up for her in front of everyone. Karen's face twisted with anger, her eyes flashing. "You think you've won, don't you? You think because she's with you, she's somehow more important than the rest of us." Karen's voice was rising, but Adam didn't flinch. His calmness only seemed to enrage her more. "I don't think I've won anything, Karen," Adam replied. "But what I do know is that I see the worth in Lila. She doesn't need to prove herself to anyone." The silence in the room was deafening. Lila could feel every pair of eyes on them, waiting for someone to speak, waiting for something to break the tension. But Adam held his ground, never once looking away from Karen. It was a look of finality, a look that told Karen everything she needed to know. There would be no more games, no more power plays. Karen stood there for a moment, her chest heaving with the anger she was trying to suppress. But then, with a final, venomous glance at Lila, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking loudly against the marble floor. Lila let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding, and Adam's hand found hers again. "You were incredible," he said quietly, his voice filled with admiration. Lila smiled, her heart light and her spirit soaring. "I don't need her approval anymore, Adam," she said, her voice steady. "I have everything I need right here." Adam looked at her with a mixture of pride and love. "And you always have." As the night continued, Lila felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't just living in a world she had once believed was out of reach. She was living her own story. And in this story, she was the hero, the one who overcame the odds, who stood tall in the face of judgment, and who found the strength to embrace who she truly was. The applause that followed their exit from the event wasn't for the designer dresses or the money, but for the quiet strength Leela carried with her. In that moment, she knew she had won over her doubts, her fears, and most of all, won herself. The weeks after the gala had passed in a blur, but for Leela, each day was a small victory. The world she had once thought she would never be a part of was now hers to navigate. There were moments when she still felt like an outsider, moments when the weight of her past, her struggles, her years of living on the edge threatened to pull her back. But every day, she grew stronger. Every day, she allowed herself to believe more in her worth, her place in this world. And Adam, steadfast and loving, was there with her every step of the way. But with every triumph, there was always the lingering shadow of Karen, the woman who had never stopped trying to tear her down. After the confrontation at the charity event, Leela had hoped that Karen's venomous comments would fade, that the other woman would realize she had no power over her. But Karen wasn't one to accept defeat easily. She remained a constant presence in Leila's life, her eyes always watching, always calculating. One afternoon, Adam and Leila were in the middle of a quiet lunch at their favorite cafe, a place where they could escape the pressures of the outside world and enjoy a peaceful moment together. The small, cozy cafe was a far cry from the glittering parties and galas they had attended recently, but it had become their haven, a place where they could simply be themselves. As they sat across from one another, sharing a simple meal, the door opened, and in walked none other than Karen. Leila felt a chill sweep through her as she saw Karen strut into the cafe, her designer clothes making her look even more out of place in this casual setting. Karen's gaze immediately found Leila's, and a smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. It was as if the universe had conspired to make this moment as uncomfortable as possible. Leila tried to ignore her, but Karen wasn't having it. With her usual flair for the dramatic, she walked over to their table, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Adam's expression remained calm, but Leila could feel the tension building. She knew what was coming. "Well, well," Karen said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Isn't this quaint? The two of you, hiding out in a little cafe, pretending to be just another ordinary couple." She leaned in slightly, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Leila. "Don't you feel embarrassed? Leila, you've stepped so far out of your league. Don't you wonder how long this fairy tale can last?" Leila met her gaze with a steady look. There was no anger in her eyes, no bitterness, just a quiet strength that had taken root deep within her. She had grown accustomed to Karen's attempts to provoke her, and she was no longer intimidated. "I'm not pretending to be anything, Karen," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This is who I am, and I'm not ashamed of it." Karen laughed, the sound sharp and derisive. "You think you've won, don't you? That somehow, because Adam is by your side, you've found your place in this world. But you're just a stepping stone for him, Leila. He'll get bored of you, and then what will you have left?" Leila took a deep breath, her fingers curling around her coffee cup. She didn't need to engage with Karen. She didn't need to stoop to her level. But she had a choice. She could either let Karen's words continue to eat away at her, or she could stand tall and show the world, and herself, that she was no longer afraid. "Karen, I don't need your approval," Leila said quietly, her eyes unwavering. "I've spent too long looking for validation from people who don't matter. Adam is with me because of who I am, not because of what I have or what I can give him. He's with me because he sees me. He knows who I am, and that's enough for him." Adam, who had been quietly observing the exchange, finally spoke. His voice was calm but filled with an undeniable conviction. "Leila is more than enough, Karen. She's more than enough for me, and she's more than enough for anyone who's ever doubted her." Karen's face flushed with a mixture of anger and frustration. "You're both pathetic," she hissed, her eyes flashing. "You think you've got it all figured out, don't you? But one day, you'll both see that this fantasy you're living isn't real. And when that day comes, Leila, I'll be there to remind you just how far beneath you really are." With that, Karen turned on her heel and stormed out of the cafe, leaving Leila and Adam in the stunned silence that followed. Leila sat back in her chair, taking a deep breath, her heart still pounding from the exchange. She had expected Karen to say something cruel, but the weight of her words still stung. It wasn't just about Karen's hatred for her, it was the reminder that no matter how far Lila had come, there would always be people like Karen who tried to drag her down. Adam reached across the table, his hand finding hers with a reassuring squeeze. "Don't let her get to you," he said softly. "She can't take away what we have." "She can't take away who you are." Lila nodded, grateful for his steady presence. "I know, sometimes it feels like no matter how much I grow, she'll always be there, trying to tear me apart." "She's just trying to break something that's already whole," Adam replied, "and she'll never succeed. You've built yourself, Lila, and no one can take that away from you. Not now, not ever." Lila smiled, the warmth of Adam's words slowly calming her nerves. She had come so far in such a short amount of time, but the road ahead wasn't going to be without its challenges. Karen wasn't going to give up. She was going to keep coming after Lila, trying to prove that she didn't belong. But Lila was learning how to let go of the fear, how to silence the doubts that had plagued her for years. She didn't need to fight back with anger or resentment. She only needed to stand tall, to keep walking forward, no matter how hard the world tried to push her down. As they left the cafe, Lila felt a sense of peace settle over her. She was no longer the woman who had to prove herself to anyone. She wasn't trying to fit into a world that didn't want her. She was creating her own space, a space where she was loved, respected, and valued for who she truly was. And no matter what Karen or anyone else said, that would always be enough. As Adam took her hand in his and they walked out into the sunshine, Lila realized that the most important thing she could ever do was live her truth. She wasn't defined by her past or by the opinions of others. She was defined by her strength, her resilience, and the love she had for herself. And in that moment, Lila knew she was finally free. Lila had always been a fighter, but it wasn't until she fully embraced her own power that she truly understood the depth of her strength. As the days passed and the challenges came, she became more and more aware of how far she had come. She no longer looked at herself as the poor woman who had been invisible to the world. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had fought through the hardest trials life could throw at her and had emerged stronger because of them. Yet, even though she had gained a new sense of self, there were moments when doubt crept in. The whispers in the back of her mind, the ones that reminded her of how things used to be, of how she used to feel, still lingered. They would surface when she least expected it, when she was alone or when the world around her seemed too overwhelming. But with Adam by her side, she had learned not to let those whispers control her. Adam had been her rock, the one constant in her life that reminded her of her worth. He had never treated her like someone who needed to change. Instead, he loved her for who she was, flaws, imperfections, and all. It was a love she had never known before, and it was the one thing that gave her the confidence to face each day head-on. That evening, Adam had invited Lila to an intimate gathering with a few of his closest friends. It was a low-key event at their favorite restaurant, one that wasn't as grand as the galas they usually attended, but it was just as important. It was a chance for Lila to connect with the people who mattered to Adam, people who had seen him through the ups and downs of his life. For Lila, it was another opportunity to prove to herself that she was more than just the poor girl who had been picked up from the streets. She was a woman of substance, and she had earned her place in this world. As they entered the restaurant, Lila couldn't help but feel a flutter of nervousness in her chest. She was no longer intimidated by the wealth or status of those around her, but there was still a part of her that worried she might not measure up. It was a fleeting thought, one she quickly dismissed, but it lingered for just a moment. She was used to feeling like an outsider in the world of the elite, but this was her life now. She was no longer an outsider. She was part of it. Adam smiled at her, his hand slipping into hers. "You okay?" he asked, sensing her slight tension. Lila nodded, giving him a reassuring smile. "I'm fine," she said softly. "Just trying to remind myself that I belong here." "You do," Adam replied, his voice steady and full of conviction. "And you've always belonged here, Lila. Don't let anyone, not even yourself, make you doubt that. They made their way to the back of the restaurant, where Adam's friends were waiting. The group greeted them warmly, and Lila felt the familiar butterflies in her stomach as she was introduced to each person. These were people who had seen Adam's journey from the beginning, people who knew him better than anyone else. And as they spoke to her, as they welcomed her into their circle, Lila realized something important. They weren't seeing her as an outsider. They were seeing her as Adam's partner, his equal, and that, more than anything, filled her heart with a quiet sense of pride. As the evening wore on, the conversation flowed easily. Lila found herself laughing, engaging in discussions about business, art, and life in ways she had never thought possible. The connections she had made, both with Adam and with his friends, were beginning to feel less like an act and more like her new reality. She was no longer pretending to be someone she wasn't. She was simply being herself, and in this world, that was enough. But as the night wore on, Karen's shadow loomed once again. The door to the restaurant opened, and in walked Karen, her entrance as dramatic as ever. The room seemed to shift, as if the very air changed when she entered. Her eyes immediately locked onto Lila, and the tension in the room grew palpable. Karen's gaze was cold, calculating. She had always been the queen of this world, the one who held the power, the one who everyone admired. And when she saw Lila, sitting there at Adam's side, laughing and engaging with the very people Karen had once considered her domain, something inside her snapped. Lila felt the weight of Karen's stare, but she didn't look away. She didn't flinch. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel that gnawing insecurity, the one that told her she wasn't good enough. She knew who she was, and she knew she had earned every ounce of respect she was receiving. Karen's heels clicked sharply as she walked toward their table, her smile a mask of false politeness. Well, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I didn't expect to see you here, Lila. I thought I'd left you behind at the charity event, but I see you've managed to worm your way into every aspect of Adam's life. Lila stood up slowly, her movements deliberate. There was no anger in her eyes, no bitterness, just quiet strength. I'm not here to fight you, Karen, Lila said calmly. I'm here because I belong here. I'm here because Adam wants me here. Karen's expression twisted, her eyes flashing with a mix of disbelief and rage. You think you've won? Don't you? She spat. You think because Adam is with you, you've somehow made it. But you're nothing more than a placeholder. He'll tire of you, Lila. He'll move on to someone better. Someone who truly fits into his world. Lila didn't let her words affect her. Instead, she looked at Adam, who was standing beside her, his presence like a fortress. He didn't need to say anything. His silence was all the answer Karen needed. I don't need to prove anything to you, Karen, Lila said, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. I don't need your approval. I don't need anyone's approval. Adam and I are exactly where we're supposed to be. Karen stood there for a moment, her anger bubbling beneath the surface, but then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking loudly against the floor. Lila watched her go, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about knowing that she didn't have to fight for her place anymore. She had earned it. As the evening came to a close, Adam and Lila left the restaurant hand in hand. The world around them felt lighter, less imposing, as if a weight had been lifted. Lila realized that she didn't need anyone's validation, especially not Karen's. She had found her place, not because she had fought for it, but because she had embraced who she truly was. As they walked down the street together, Adam squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with love. You were amazing tonight, he said softly. Lila smiled, her heart full. I wasn't amazing, Adam. I was just myself. And in that moment, she realized that being herself was more than enough. As the days went by, Lila found herself settling more and more into the life she had once thought impossible. She no longer questioned her place in the world, nor did she allow the opinions of others, especially Karen's, to dictate her self-worth. Adam had been her constant, unwavering in his belief that she was enough, and she was beginning to believe it too. However, Life had a way of throwing curveballs when least expected. It wasn't long before Lila faced a challenge that tested her resolve in ways she had never imagined. It was one evening after a quiet dinner with Adam that the news came: a business deal that Adam had been working on for months had hit a major roadblock. A key partner, someone who held a significant amount of influence in the industry, had pulled out at the last minute. Adam's usually calm demeanor faltered as he looked over the documents in front of him, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. Lila had been sitting beside him, sipping her wine, when she noticed the sudden shift in his mood. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with concern. Adam looked up at her, his face etched with frustration. "I thought we had everything lined up perfectly, but now, it looks like we've lost the backing we needed for the project to move forward. Without it, this could set us back months, maybe even years. I don't know what we're going to do." Lila's heart sank. She had seen Adam face challenges before, but this was different. This was something that could affect everything: his reputation, his business, their future together. For a moment, she saw the vulnerability in his eyes that he usually kept hidden. He wasn't the confident, indestructible man she had come to admire. In that moment, he was just a man facing a major setback. Without thinking, Lila stood up and walked over to where he sat. She placed her hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "What if we approach this differently?" she suggested, her voice steady with the kind of confidence she had gained over the past few months. "You've always been able to see things from a new perspective, Adam. What if we don't just wait for someone else to fix this? What if we make it happen ourselves?" Adam looked up at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Lila continued, her voice gaining strength, "we take control of this situation. You've built this company from the ground up because of your vision, your determination, and your ability to think outside the box. You don't need anyone else to validate your ideas. You've got the skills, the knowledge, and the heart to make this work. So, let's find a way to turn this setback into an opportunity." Adam stared at her for a long moment, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a man trying to cover up his frustration, it was the smile of someone who had just realized something important. "You're right," he said, his voice softer now. "I've been so focused on what went wrong that I didn't stop to think about what could go right. I've been waiting for others to step in and help, but maybe what I really need to do is trust myself and trust you." Lila felt a surge of pride. She had never once doubted Adam's capabilities, but seeing him acknowledge that he could overcome this challenge, not alone, but with her by his side, was a breakthrough. It wasn't just about the business deal anymore, it was about their partnership, their ability to face adversity together, as equals. For the next few days, they worked tirelessly, brainstorming ideas, reaching out to new potential investors, and exploring alternative ways to move the project forward. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights, but they did it together. Adam's confidence in her, in their combined abilities, grew with each passing day, and Lila found herself taking on more responsibilities, stepping into new roles within Adam's business that she had never imagined she would be capable of. The day the deal was finally secured was one of the most satisfying moments of Lila's life. It wasn't just the victory of closing the deal, it was the realization that she had contributed to something far greater than herself. She had been the catalyst that helped Adam rediscover his strength, his belief in his own vision. They had both proven to themselves that they didn't need anyone's validation to succeed. They had everything they needed within them. The day they signed the new deal, Lila walked into the office with Adam, feeling an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. They had done it, together. And as they stood in the conference room, surrounded by the team they had built, Adam turned to her, his eyes full of pride. "I couldn't have done this without you, Lila," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've been more than just my partner, you've been my strength when I couldn't find my own." Lila smiled, her heart swelling with love for the man standing before her. "We're in this together, Adam. Always." Later that evening, as they celebrated their success over dinner, Lila reflected on how much her life had changed. She had come so far from the woman who once doubted her own worth, who had struggled to see herself as anything more than a product of her circumstances. Now, she was a woman who had found her place, not just beside Adam, but beside herself. She wasn't just part of Adam's world, she was creating her own. But with success came the inevitable challenges. Karen, as always, had been lurking in the background, waiting for an opportunity to strike. After the deal had gone through, she had been quick to reach out to Lila, sending a message congratulating her, but with the unmistakable edge of sarcasm laced through her words. Well, I see you've managed to win Adam's approval again, the message read. I wonder how long that will last. You've gotten what you wanted, but I hope you realize that people like us don't stay at the top forever. You'll fall, and when you do, it won't be pretty. Lila read the message, feeling the familiar sting of Karen's words, but this time, there was no fear. There was no anxiety about how Karen's bitterness might affect her. Instead, she felt a sense of clarity. Karen didn't define her. No one did. Later that evening, as she sat with Adam, Lila told him about the message. Adam's eyes narrowed as he read the text. She's not going to stop, is she? He asked, his tone frustrated. Lila shook her head, a smile tugging at her lips. Maybe she won't, but I'm not going anywhere. I've earned my place here, and no one can take that away from me, not even Karen. Adam smiled, his love for her evident in his eyes. You've always been stronger than you give yourself credit for. And in that moment, Lila realized just how far she had come. She wasn't the same woman who had once allowed others to make her feel small. She wasn't the woman who had hidden behind insecurity and fear. She was someone who stood tall, someone who knew her worth, and no one, not even Karen, could ever take that away. The days that followed the business deal were a whirlwind. Adam's success was a victory not only for him but for both of them. Together, they had overcome the odds, and now they were more determined than ever to build their future. But as Lila sat beside Adam, watching him navigate the complexities of his business world, she couldn't ignore the subtle shift that had occurred within herself. The success, the admiration, the love, everything she had wanted had come to her, but there was something deeper that needed to be understood. She was no longer just living for the approval of others. She had begun to understand the true power of self-acceptance, the importance of building her own legacy. Her place in Adam's world was no longer about being a passenger in his life, it was about being a partner, an equal. However, Karen's presence still loomed, like an uninvited shadow that refused to fade. It was almost as if she knew exactly when to strike, when Lila was beginning to feel too secure. Despite everything Lila had achieved, Karen seemed to be a constant reminder of the world Lila had once struggled to escape. But the difference now was that Lila no longer allowed Karen's words or actions to have power over her. One afternoon, after a particularly long and exhausting meeting, Lila was at the office alone, organizing some papers for the upcoming presentation. Adam had promised to pick her up later, but for now, she was alone with her thoughts. The silence of the office felt oddly comforting, giving her space to breathe, to reflect on how far she had come. She was learning to embrace the woman she had always been, the woman who had fought for everything, the woman who had loved with all her heart despite the scars. It was during this rare moment of peace that the phone buzzed on her desk. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered it anyway, curiosity getting the best of her. "Hello, is this Lila?" a woman's voice asked on the other end. "Yes, this is Lila. Who's calling?" "It's Karen," the voice replied, with no warmth, only cold precision. "I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time." Lila's stomach tightened. She hadn't expected to hear from Karen directly. There was no preamble, no pleasantries, just the sharp, biting tone that Lila had become so familiar with. "What do you want, Karen?" Lila asked, trying to keep her voice steady, knowing this conversation wouldn't be easy. "I just wanted to congratulate you on your latest victory," Karen said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've managed to charm your way into Adam's life, and now you've succeeded in the business world too. I have to admit, I'm impressed. You're playing the game better than I thought." Leela took a deep breath, refusing to let Karen's venom seep into her. I didn't charm my way into anything, Karen. I earned my place, just like anyone else. You should try it sometime. Earning things rather than expecting them. There was a brief silence on the other end, before Karen's voice returned, colder than before. You think you've won, don't you? But the truth is, you're just a temporary fix for Adam. He'll get bored of you, just like all the others. You're not his type, and you never will be. He's just too proud to admit it. Lila's pulse quickened, but she refused to let Karen see that she had struck a nerve. I'm not going anywhere, Karen. You're wasting your energy trying to drag me down. You can say whatever you want, but it won't change the fact that Adam and I are together because we want to be, not because of some game you're trying to play. There was another pause, longer this time. Before Karen spoke again, her voice laced with spite. Enjoy it while it lasts, Lila. When the truth comes out, you'll see just how quickly everything can unravel. Adam will never be able to keep up the charade forever. Lila was silent for a moment, feeling the weight of Karen's words. But in that silence, something shifted inside her. She realized that she didn't need to answer, didn't need to defend herself, or Adam. Karen's words were hollow. They were meant to provoke, to instill doubt. But Lila was done with doubt. She was done with allowing others to dictate her worth. Karen, she finally said, her voice calm but firm. Your opinion doesn't matter to me anymore. I've spent too long caring about what people like you think. I don't need your validation, and neither does Adam. We are who we are, and that's enough. So, if you're done with your little games, I'll be hanging up now. Ivets. Before Karen could respond, Lila ended the call. She felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she realized that Karen's words no longer had the power to control her. She wasn't living for Karen's approval, or anyone else's for that matter. She was living for herself. As she sat back in her chair, a sense of peace settled over her. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about trusting herself, trusting that she had earned her place in Adam's life and in this world. The challenges she had faced, the struggles she had overcome, they had shaped her into the woman she was today. She wasn't perfect, but she was real, and that was enough. The door to the office opened, and Adam stepped inside, a smile on his face as he saw her sitting at her desk. I hope I didn't interrupt anything important, he said, his voice light and teasing. Lila smiled up at him, her heart swelling with love for the man who had never doubted her, who had always been her anchor. Not at all, she replied. I was just thinking about how far I've come, and how much I've learned. Adam raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, and what's that? That I don't need anyone's approval anymore, Lila said, standing up from the desk to meet him. I don't need to prove myself to anyone. Not to you, not to Karen, not to anyone. Adam stepped forward, wrapping his arms around her, his embrace strong and secure. I'm proud of you, he whispered. I always have been. Lila held him close, feeling the warmth of his love surround her. She realized, in that moment, that everything she had fought for, everything she had worked so hard to achieve, had led her here. She wasn't just standing beside Adam anymore. She was standing beside herself. And that was the greatest victory of all. As they left the office together, ready to face whatever came next, Lila knew one thing for certain. She was finally free. Free from the judgment of others. Free from the doubt that had once defined her. She was living her truth, and nothing or no one could take that away. The days following the call with Karen felt like a turning point for Lila. She had known for a while that she had to stop letting others define her worth, but it wasn't until that moment, standing alone in the office after ending the call, that she truly understood the power of letting go. Letting go of the past. Letting go of the fear. Letting go of the need for validation from people like Karen. It wasn't an easy journey. The whispers of doubt still lingered in the back of her mind. They were quiet now, but they were always there, waiting for a crack in her confidence. But Lila was learning not to listen to them. She had come so far, and she was done letting anyone, Karen or anyone else, drag her back. Adam had always been there, a steady presence in her life, supporting her, pushing her to see herself the way he saw her. But now, Lila was beginning to believe in herself, too. She was beginning to trust that she deserved everything she had fought for. That evening, as Adam and Lila stood together on their penthouse balcony, overlooking the city, Lila felt a sense of peace she had never known. The city lights twinkled below them, but in that moment, it wasn't the view that captivated her. It was Adam, standing beside her, his hand resting gently on her back, offering his quiet strength without saying a word. "You know," Adam said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I've never seen you like this. So sure of yourself, so at peace." Lila smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of love and gratitude. "I've been working on it," she said softly. "I've spent so many years feeling like I wasn't enough, like I had to prove myself to everyone around me. But now, I realize that I don't need to do that anymore. I am enough, just as I am." Adam turned to face her, his expression soft and full of warmth. "You always were enough, Lila. You just had to realize it for yourself." Lila nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It was true. She had spent so much time seeking approval from others that she had forgotten to see her own worth. But now, she didn't need anyone's approval. She had Adam's love, she had her own strength, and that was enough. As they stood there, watching the world move beneath them, Lila realized something else. She had spent so much time running from her past, hiding from the things that made her feel small. But in doing so, she had also run away from the very things that made her strong, her resilience, her determination, the years of struggle that had shaped her into the woman she was today. Those things weren't weaknesses, they were her foundation. "I've been thinking a lot about my past," Lila said, her voice quiet but steady. "About everything I've been through to get here." Adam listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers. "What about it?" Lila took a deep breath, feeling a sense of release as she spoke. "I spent so many years trying to forget where I came from. I thought if I could just be like everyone else, if I could just fit in, then maybe I'd feel like I belonged. But the truth is, I've always belonged, not because of what I have or who I'm with, but because of who I am. I've earned my place in this world, and I'm done running from it." Adam's smile was gentle, and for a moment, there was a quiet understanding between them. Lila had found something she hadn't known she was looking for: acceptance. Not from the world around her, but from herself. The next few weeks brought more challenges, but they didn't seem as daunting as they once had. Lila had become more resilient, more confident in her ability to handle whatever came her way. Her relationship with Adam had deepened, strengthened by the trials they had faced together, but more importantly, strengthened by the way they had learned to support each other. They were no longer just two people trying to make it work, they were partners, in every sense of the word, and their love had become a foundation they could both stand on, no matter what came their way. But, as always, Karen had not given up. Even though Lila had learned to ignore her, to rise above the petty jabs and the jealousy, Karen still found ways to stir the pot. It was during one of Adam's major business presentations, a high-stakes event with clients and investors, that Karen reappeared, unexpectedly. Lila and Adam were both attending the presentation, and Lila had been helping him prepare behind the scenes. She was sitting in the front row of the conference room when Karen made her entrance, slipping into the room with that unmistakable air of entitlement. Lila's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly reminded herself that she had nothing to fear. Not anymore. Karen's eyes locked onto Lila's, and for a moment, Lila felt that familiar spark of tension. But this time, it was different. She didn't feel that old knot of insecurity tightening in her chest. Instead, she felt calm, confident. She knew who she was, and she knew she didn't have to prove anything to Karen or anyone else. Adam, too, noticed Karen's arrival. His expression hardened for a moment, but when he turned to Lila, his face softened, a reassuring smile curving his lips. Without a word, he squeezed her hand gently, a silent promise that they were in this together. The meeting began, and Karen, as usual, tried to insert herself into the proceedings, making pointed remarks and drawing attention to herself. Lila could see the tension in Adam's posture, but he remained focused, confident in his presentation. And with each passing moment, Lila realized that Karen's attempts to undermine her didn't matter. What mattered was that Adam and Lila were moving forward. Together, they had something far more valuable than wealth or status. They had respect for each other, trust, and the kind of love that could weather any storm. After the meeting ended, Adam and Lila walked out of the conference room, side by side, with heads held high. Karen didn't matter anymore. Her jealousy, her bitterness, they no longer had the power to affect them. "You were amazing today," Lila said, her voice full of admiration. "You handled everything so well." Adam smiled, his eyes softening. "You're amazing too. You've helped me more than I ever could have imagined." Lila took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. This was her life now. No more pretending, no more doubting. She was exactly where she was meant to be, with the person she loved, and she had earned every step along the way. As they walked hand in hand through the city, Lila realized that she had come full circle. She had spent so many years feeling like she didn't belong, like she wasn't good enough. But now, she knew that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She was living her truth, and that was all that mattered. The days following the presentation with Karen were a reminder to Lila of just how far she had come. Life, with all its challenges and setbacks, had led her to a place of peace she had never expected. As she moved through the world with Adam by her side, she felt stronger, more capable, and more certain of her place in it. She no longer questioned her worth, nor did she wonder if she truly belonged in the life she was building. Yet, despite the calm that had settled over her, a lingering thought still tugged at the back of her mind. She had become so used to fighting, to proving herself worthy, that the idea of simply existing without the need for validation or approval from anyone was a foreign concept. She had overcome so much, yet there was still a part of her that feared it might all slip away. One evening, as they sat together in their penthouse, enjoying a rare, quiet dinner, Lila voiced the thought that had been on her mind. "Do you ever wonder if it's all too good to be true?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with uncertainty. "Like, maybe one day, someone will see through the facade, and it will all come crashing down?" Adam looked at her, his expression softening. He could see the doubt in her eyes, the remnants of the fear that had once consumed her. "Lila," he said gently, his hand reaching out to touch hers, "there's no facade. This, us, it's real. We've worked hard for this, and you've earned your place in this life. You don't need to worry about it all coming crashing down, not unless you want it to." His words, though simple, hit Lila with the force of a revelation. She had spent so much time trying to fit in, trying to prove her worth to the world around her, that she had forgotten the most important lesson. She had already earned everything she had. She didn't need to fight for a place in this world she already belonged. "Maybe I've been too focused on the wrong things," Lila admitted, her voice quiet, almost as though she was talking to herself. "Maybe I've been so afraid of losing everything that I forgot to enjoy it, to enjoy us." Adam smiled, his eyes filled with affection. "You don't have to worry, Lila. We're building something real together, and no one, not even Karen, can take that away from us. You've learned how to stand on your own, and now we're standing together. That's the most important thing." Lila felt a sense of relief wash over her as Adam spoke. For the first time in what felt like ages, she allowed herself to fully believe in what they had built together. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real. And that was enough. The next few weeks were filled with more moments of growth, both for Lila and for her relationship with Adam. They were learning to communicate more openly, to support one another through their respective challenges, and to build a future that was truly theirs. Lila, once filled with uncertainty, was beginning to embrace the idea of enjoying the present, of living fully in the life she had worked so hard to create. But as with all things, There were moments when the past would come back to remind her of the struggles she had faced. One afternoon, while Adam was away on a business trip, Lila was at the local market picking up some groceries when she ran into someone from her past, someone she never expected to see again. Standing in front of her, with a familiar face and a hesitant smile, was her mother. The woman who had abandoned her and her siblings all those years ago. The woman who had walked out of their lives without a second thought, leaving Lila to grow up in the harshest of conditions. Lila froze, her heart racing as she took in the sight of her mother, standing there as though nothing had changed. She had aged, the years marked by the fine lines on her face, but the look in her eyes was the same cold, distant, as if she were looking at a stranger rather than her own daughter. "Lila," her mother said, her voice uncertain, almost apologetic. "I didn't expect to see you here." Lila's mind raced, her emotions caught between anger, confusion, and something else, something she couldn't quite name. She had spent so many years building a life without her mother, learning to survive without the one person who was supposed to protect her. And now, here she was, standing in front of her, acting as though she had a right to be a part of Lila's life. "What do you want?" Lila asked, her voice sharp, defensive. It wasn't just the pain of the past that made her speak with such bitterness. It was the raw feeling of betrayal that had never truly gone away. Her mother shifted uncomfortably, her gaze dropping to the floor before meeting Lila's eyes again. "I've been following your success," she said, her voice laced with a hint of pride that felt insincere. "I'm proud of you. I wanted to say that. I've been thinking a lot about the past, and I know I didn't do right by you. I was selfish, and I regret it." Lila's heart clenched at her mother's words, but there was no forgiveness in her. "Not yet. Maybe never. You can't just show up after all these years and pretend like everything is okay," Lila said, her voice trembling slightly with the weight of the emotions she had buried deep inside. "You left me, Mom. You left us. And now, after all this time, you think you can just come back and make it right?" Her mother opened her mouth to speak, but Lila cut her off. "No, I don't need you in my life. I've built everything I have without you. I don't need your approval or your apology. I'm not that scared little girl anymore." The words stung, but they were the truth. Lila had fought too hard to be where she was, to let someone like her mother undo everything she had built. With one final glance at her mother, Lila turned and walked away, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know why her mother had appeared now, or why she had even bothered to try to reach out, but she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't going to let the past drag her down anymore. When Adam returned from his business trip, Lila didn't waste time sharing the encounter. She didn't need to explain the emotions running through her. Adam already understood. He knew how hard Lila had worked to get to this point, and he knew how much the past still affected her. But he also knew how strong she was, and that she would rise above whatever came her way. "You're not that girl anymore," Adam said, holding her close. "You're the woman who made this life for herself, and no one can take that away from you." Lila smiled, resting her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "You're right," she whispered. "I'm not that girl, and I'm never going back." Together, they had built a life that was theirs, and together, they would face whatever came next stronger than before, with love, trust, and a partnership that nothing could break. Life had begun to feel like a new beginning, but as with any journey, challenges still arose. Lila had been on a steady path to self-discovery and confidence, but the world had a way of testing that newfound strength, pushing her to places she'd never expected to go. Despite everything she had overcome, there was still one person who refused to let her move on without looking back. Karen. Lila had tried to shake off the anger that Karen stirred in her, but it seemed like Karen was always lurking just around the corner, ready to stir the pot once more. It had been a few weeks since their last encounter, and Lila thought, perhaps naively, that she had finally escaped her shadow. She was mistaken. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Adam received an unexpected call. The moment he stepped into the apartment, Lila could see the shift in his demeanor. His expression was tense, his brows furrowed as he closed the door behind him. "Something's wrong," Leela said, standing from the sofa, her gaze fixed on him. She could read him like a book now when something weighed on him. It showed. "It's Karen," Adam replied, his voice tight with frustration. "She's been spreading rumors about you. About us." Lila's stomach dropped. Rumors? She could feel the anger rising in her chest. After everything they had been through, Karen had the nerve to attack their relationship again. It was as if Karen had made it her life's mission to destroy any peace they had found. "What kind of rumors?" Lila asked, trying to keep her voice calm despite the swirling storm inside her. Adam shook his head, his lips pressed into a hard line. "The usual. She's been telling people you're only with me for my money, that you don't deserve any of this. That you're just using me to climb the social ladder." Lila's eyes narrowed, a chill running through her veins. The familiar sting of Karen's judgment was one she had grown too accustomed to, but it didn't make it any easier to handle. She had worked so hard to build herself up, to prove that she was worthy of love, worthy of respect, not because of Adam's wealth, but because of her strength and her character. And now, Karen was trying to tear all that down with baseless lies. "Why does she keep doing this?" Lila muttered under her breath, running a hand through her hair in frustration. "Why can't she just let it go?" Adam walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder, his voice soft. "Because she can't stand seeing us happy. She can't stand that I chose you. You've shown me something I never thought I'd find peace, and she'll never understand that." Lila met his eyes, the weight of his words sinking in. Adam wasn't just speaking out of anger or frustration. He was speaking from his heart. He truly believed in her, in them. And in that moment, Lila realized something important. She didn't need to let Karen's hatred define her happiness. "I'm not going to let her tear me down, Adam," Lila said firmly, her voice steady with resolve. "I've worked too hard for everything I have, and I'm not going to let anyone, least of all Karen, take that away from me." Adam smiled, his hand tightening around hers. "I'm proud of you, Lila. You're stronger than you know." The next few days were filled with tension, but Lila found herself carrying that same strength she had felt earlier in her conversation with Adam. She refused to let Karen's words dictate her emotions. She had learned that the opinions of small-minded people couldn't touch her. Not when she had built her life on something solid, on love, respect, and trust. But Karen wasn't finished yet. A week later, as Lila was finishing up some work at their apartment, she received a call from an unknown number. For a moment, she hesitated, but then answered it, thinking it might be a client or one of her contacts. "Lila," a familiar voice said, the words dripping with spite. "It's Karen." Lila's blood ran cold, but she took a deep breath, refusing to let the anger take over. "What do you want, Karen?" "Oh, nothing much," Karen replied sweetly. "Just wanted to let you know that I've been spreading the word about you. About how you're nothing more than a gold digger who's found a rich man to take care of her. You've managed to fool Adam, haven't you? But it's only a matter of time before the truth comes out, and when it does, he'll be the one who ends up looking like a fool. You won't be able to hide behind him forever." Lila's heart raced as Karen's words hit her like a slap in the face. The audacity, the cruelty, the way Karen thought she could manipulate everything and everyone around her. Lila clenched her fists, her knuckles turning white as she took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure. "You're wasting your time, Karen," Lila said, her voice cold and calm. "I don't care what you say about me anymore. You can keep spreading your lies, but I know who I am, and I know what I mean to Adam. That's all that matters." Karen laughed, the sound harsh and cruel. "You think you're going to win, don't you? You think you've got everything figured out. But you haven't. You're just a temporary solution to a problem he's too proud to face. You'll see, Lila. You'll see what happens when the truth comes to light." Before Lila could respond, Karen hung up. The silence that followed felt suffocating, but Lila didn't let it consume her. She stood tall, her mind focused. She wasn't going to let Karen's bitterness break her. When Adam came home later that evening, Lila knew he could tell something was wrong. She didn't need to say a word, he could see it in her eyes. "What happened?" he asked, his voice gentle yet firm. Lila looked up at him, her eyes filled with a calm certainty. "Karen called me again," she said. "She's still spreading rumors about me, about us." Adam's expression darkened. "I don't know why she keeps doing this. But Lila, I need you to know something. You don't have to prove anything to her, to anyone. I know who you are, and that's all that matters." Lila nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I know, and I don't need her approval. I've got everything I need right here." She gestured between them, her hand sweeping through the air, emphasizing the bond they had. "I've got you, and that's enough. I don't need to keep fighting battles that aren't mine." Adam stepped closer, pulling her into his arms. "You've already won, Lila. You've won my heart. You've won our life together, and nothing can take that away." As Lila stood there, held in Adam's arms, she realized something important. It wasn't about fighting back against Karen or anyone else who tried to bring her down. It was about knowing that she was enough, that she didn't need anyone's validation to stand tall in the world. She had found her place, and it wasn't in the approval of others, it was in the strength of her own heart. That night, as they sat down for dinner, Adam took her hand across the table, a quiet promise in his eyes. "We'll face everything together, Lila. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." And Lila knew, deep in her heart, that no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter how many times Karen tried to tear them down, they would always rise. Together, the days that followed felt like a quiet storm on the horizon still, but with the promise of something changing. Lila had become accustomed to the drama that seemed to swirl around her, especially with Karen always lurking in the background, throwing shadows over her happiness. But as she sat with Adam, day after day, she realized something important. She didn't have to fight the world anymore. She had learned that her greatest strength wasn't in how she responded to the challenges that came her way. It was in how she chose to live her life, in how she faced each new day with a heart that knew its worth. The world had never been kind to Lila, and it had taken her years to build a foundation strong enough to stand on her own. She had weathered storms, faced humiliations, and been told she wasn't enough. Yet here she was, standing taller than ever, holding on to the truth that she didn't need anyone's approval to be whole. She had already earned her place, not because of who she was with, but because of who she had become. Adam's business had soared in the wake of their recent success, but it wasn't just his professional growth that Lila felt most proud of. It was the strength of their partnership. They had become a team in the truest sense. They supported one another, challenged each other, and grew together. And as Lila's confidence deepened, she started realizing that their relationship wasn't just about building a future. It was about forging a connection that was unshakable, one that no one could break, not even Karen. But Karen wasn't finished yet. It was a Thursday afternoon when Lila received an unexpected call from one of the investors that Adam had been working closely with. She was in the middle of preparing for another presentation when the phone rang, the unfamiliar number flashing on her screen. Something told her it wasn't going to be a regular inquiry or update. "Lila?" the voice on the other end asked, a hint of tension in it. "Yes, this is Lila," she replied, her tone wary. She could sense that something was wrong. "It's about the recent business dealings with Adam. You might want to be prepared for a little shake-up." The voice faltered, but only for a second. "We've been hearing some things, rumors, to be specific." Lila's stomach tightened. "What kind of rumors?" "Some concerning rumors about Adam's relationship with you, about the way things have been handled with the recent project," the investor continued. "There's talk about how his personal life is affecting his business decisions, and well, let's just say there are whispers that you've become too involved. It's causing some discomfort among some of the other investors." Lila felt a sickening lurch in her stomach. Karen. She had to be behind this. It was exactly the kind of tactic she would employ: whispers, rumors, anything to sow discord, anything to tear them apart. Her words, though, carried a venom that went deeper than just business. This wasn't about investments anymore. This was about control. And Karen, it seemed, wasn't ready to let go. "Thank you for letting me know," Lila said, trying to steady her voice. "I'll handle this. You don't need to worry about anything on our end." The call ended, but the impact lingered. Lila's mind raced as she stared out the window, her thoughts tumbling over each other. How far would Karen go? How far was she willing to push to break what they had built? This wasn't just a professional attack, it was personal. Karen was trying to plant seeds of doubt, to make Adam question everything he had built, everything they had built. For a moment, Lila felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had fought so hard to come this far, to rise above her circumstances, and now it seemed as if it could all be undone by someone who didn't understand the depth of what she had found. But as the first wave of fear passed, Lila's mind cleared. She had already won this battle. She didn't need to prove herself again. She just needed to show Adam that the strength they had together was unbreakable. That evening, when Adam came home, Lila was ready. She knew she couldn't keep this from him, couldn't let it fester. The tension was in the air even before she spoke, as though he could sense something was wrong. But this time, she wasn't hiding anything. She wasn't retreating into herself. This was their life, their fight, and they would face it together. "Adam," she began, her voice calm but firm. "We need to talk." He looked up at her, concern filling his eyes as he moved toward her. "What's going on? You look upset." Lila took a deep breath. "I just got off the phone with one of your investors. There's been talk, rumors, about us, about our relationship." Adam's face hardened, his jaw clenching as he listened. He didn't say anything at first, just allowed Lila to continue. "Karen's been spreading lies again," Lila continued, her voice steady. "She's telling people that you're making bad business decisions because of me, that I'm too involved, that I'm affecting your judgment. She's trying to turn people against us, to make them believe that we're some kind of mistake." Adam took a step closer, his gaze softening. "Is this about her again?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost resigned. "Yes," Lila said, her voice tinged with frustration. "She's still trying to control everything. She's using the same old tricks. But this time, I'm not going to let her win. I'm not going to let her tear us apart." Adam reached out, his hand cupping her face gently. "Lila, listen to me," he said, his voice steady. "You are not the problem. You're not the one causing any issues. We've been through enough together to know that we can handle anything that comes our way. Don't let her words shake your confidence in what we have." Lila looked up at him, her eyes full of emotion. "But it's not just about us, Adam. It's about everything you've worked for. It's about your business, your reputation. What if people start believing her? What if they think we're not as strong as we've built ourselves to be? Then we'll prove them wrong," Adam said, his voice resolute. "Lila, what we have is real. The world can say what it wants, but we know who we are. We know what we're capable of. And I believe in us. I believe in you. And I will not let anyone, especially Karen, take that away from us." Lila's heart swelled with pride as she looked at him, seeing the truth in his eyes. He was right. They had already proven what they were capable of. It didn't matter what Karen said or did. She could spread all the rumors she wanted, but it wouldn't change the fact that Lila and Adam had built something real, and no one could tear that down. "We'll face this together," Lila said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll make sure people know the truth. We don't need anyone else's approval." "We've already won," Adam smiled, taking her hand in his. "Together," he repeated, his voice filled with conviction. As they sat down together, their hands intertwined, Lila realized that this was just another chapter in their journey. The road ahead might not always be easy, but as long as they had each other, there was nothing they couldn't overcome.